Imagine a classroom where students know what they're learning, why it matters, and ways to demonstrate evidence of learning. In this episode, we dial in on clarity and how it not only impacts achievement, but rather has the potential to transform engagement, belonging, and grow student agency. Research tells us that when students can answer questions like, "Where am I going?" and "What does success look like?" the classroom experience begins to shift as students become active drivers of their own learning. In this episode, I'm joined by Geoff Goldsworthy and Dallas Thiessen, two NESD administrators and educators who share practical strategies for creating classroom interactions that spark curiosity, deepen thinking, and empower students to take ownership. We'll explore the ways Clarify Ed supports teachers in designing clear learning intentions, helps build clear learning progressions, and uses student feedback to move learning forward, all while fostering relationships, deepening understanding, and freeing up time. If you're ready to shift from what are we doing to what are we learning and why, this is the conversation for you. Stay tuned for part 1 of this 3-part series. Welcome to Northeast Voices, a podcast that spotlights the innovators and change makers in education. We're here to share the stories of inclusion, empowerment, and the impactful connections with the Northeast School Division and beyond, focusing on the pivotal role of students, families, and teachers. Join us as we dive into the conversations revealing the strategies and moments shaping the future of education. Any Voices is your platform for inspiration and connection, and is recorded in the Northeast School Division, sharing the land of Treaties 4, 5, 6, and homeland of the Métis in Northeast Saskatchewan. Be sure to subscribe and join our community of innovators and change makers. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Any Voices. Today I'm joined by Geoff and Dallas, and we're going to dig into the topic of clarity and what that looks like in the classroom. What are some tools that can help us to dig in deeper to clarity, make it better for us as teachers and for students as well, so we can capture better evidence of their learning. So welcome to the podcast today. So let's just start with a quick roundtable of who are you, where do you teach, what is your role during the day, and then let's just start with those basic intros, and then we'll loop into what is your school doing for clarity. So who'd like to start us off?
I don't mind going. My name is Geoff Goldsworthy. I teach at Birkdale School. I'm the principal there. I teach 7 to 12 ELA and 9 to 12 history is pretty much what I predominantly teach. And I started using Verso and Clarify Ed last year. And so this is my second year along the journey.
Thank you, Geoff.
All right. My name's Dallas Thiessen. I am at Tisdale Middle and Secondary School. I'm one of the vice principals here. I manage the grade 8 and 9 kind of as my portfolio. I teach grade 9 math. I've also taught some grade 9 social, and I'm kind of new to this journey of Verso. There was a group or a team that used it last year, and I just thought it was interesting, so I wanted to jump on board and give it a shot this year.
And there's lots of exciting pieces. You might hear us talk about Verso or Clarify Ed. Verso is how the tool started, and then they've rebranded into Clarify Ed, the same tool that we're going to talk about, but it all centers around the idea of clarity. And we've done some work on formative and summative assessment. We've talked about balanced assessment. And then last year and the start of this year as a division, we've dug into outcome-based success criteria in pursuit of how can we help to be clearer about what we're expecting from students, what it is that we're wanting to learn, and how do we help students know where they're at along that learning journey. So how are you digging into clarity kind of within your building? And then we'll sort of dig into what does Clarify Ed look like in your school and how is it supporting you? So what does clarity look like, and what are some of the work you're doing with your teachers around clarity?
So I signed up 2 of my staff to join me on the 2 sessions in Warman. Unfortunately, they couldn't make one because of bad weather, but those 2 staff and I are going to do our sprint, our next individual sprint. We're going to be in a group and we're going to focus on Clarify Ed. Right now, I'm kind of the only one that's been using it, but we spent our last SIP day actually using the stuff from that day 2 in Warman and going
Nice.
through and really showing them how the tool works. So I think they're pretty engaged on giving it a try and seeing how it's working.
And Dallas, you're in a bigger school setting. So Birkdale is a K to 12. How many students would be in Birkdale, Geoff?
49 on a good days.
49 on a good day. And so Dallas, you're in a 6 to 12 at TMSS. Approximately how many students at TMSS?
Yeah, we have about 480 students. And so The idea of bringing clarity. We started, I guess, the beginning of this year, we've been talking about outcome-based success criteria and using tools like Copilot to help bring clarity with more outcome-based assessment. And I think this tool of Clarify Ed brings more of a focus to, your daily lessons and bringing some clarity within the classroom. There's a group of us that are focused on using Clarify Ed as a tool to bring more clarity into our classrooms and then use it to help our staff in the future.
And so this is sort of an exploratory year. We had some schools on board last year, so some of you have a little bit more experience, more schools onboarding and trying it out this year. Just in case you're catching this episode and you're not from the Northeast, we're in Saskatchewan, so we have outcomes set by the ministry. Then we want to be able to assess the outcomes to know that we have evidence of the students' understanding and being able to do and understand those outcomes and what's expected. And in the Northeast, we generally unpack the outcomes. You might have heard of Curriculum Corner. And then we take the unpacked outcomes and move them into rubrics so that we're clear on what does not yet, mostly meeting, FM, which is fully meeting or our proficiency level, and then enriched understandings. And so in our rubrics, the newer rubrics, we have bullet points of kind of the must do, can't fail, which are closer to those outcome-based success criteria. But the feedback we've gotten from teachers is we're still pretty heavy on the teacher language in some of our rubrics. And because we started the unpacking process probably 15 years ago, those early rubrics are still more of a sentence with a lot of things packed into it and not quite as clear. So divisionally, we've met together as staffs in all different buildings and worked on using the information and the proficiency level of the rubric and then putting that into Copilot, reviewing the indicators, and then asking Copilot to help us come up with outcome-based success criteria. So those bigger success criteria that we want to assess on to know that students understand that outcome. And so we've been using a variety of tools to do that. And some teachers just meet in groups and they go through the indicators and they come up with these are we've pulled together these outcome-based success criteria. But what we find is there's a lot loaded into that one outcome-based success criteria. And Clarify Ed has been really valuable in if you take that outcome-based success criteria and put it in there as a learning intention. And I think this is where we can enter into the conversation about when we're using a clarity pack, it asks us to start with a learning intention. And so when we put in that outcome-based success criteria, it'll say, do you mean this? Or do you mean this? And so do you find that it helps you to narrow that down and break it into more manageable chunks for students?
I think like last year, some of the feedback that we got from teachers using Clarify Ed was they were trying it with the outcomes and it was too broad. And I think narrowing in on a specific learning intention or as something that you're doing within the classroom and using the tool that way has just made things a lot easier and it works really smoothly and it develops your learning intention and success criteria and it's pretty smooth.
So I was one of those people who signed up for the program last year, and I was definitely doing that. We started and we were putting in outcomes, and then I was using it like a unit outcome. So we might take 2-3 weeks on it and do 1 or 2 check-ins, and it wasn't very effective. I didn't like the tool, and I started to go, I don't see the point in this. This year, after we went to the first meeting in Warman, I sat there and went, oh, this is supposed to be really granular and really small part of an outcome or even a success criteria. And that has changed my understanding of the tool and also how I use it now. And so now I might go in and say, hey, this isn't something we're working on for the week or for today and tomorrow. Here's our target. Here's our learning intention. And here's what we're going to do to see if we can't learn it. And so it's been really helpful that way.
And so when you're in Clarify Ed, one of the first things that you do is the clarity pack. So we'll focus on what comes in that clarity pack. We've used the language of outcome-based success criteria because it's kind of narrowed it down a little bit. But I know talking to the two of you and other principals and other teachers who are using it, they just said there's just too much even packed into that one. And like you said, probably a day or two or even down to what do I want kids to do at the end of that hour, at the end of that class or over those couple of days? When we talk about the check-ins, that would also, I'm assuming, make the check-ins much faster as well when it's more granular. But you can put them in and then it narrows it down. And Dallas, I think both of you mentioned, it'll come up with some success criteria. So it talks about, and I think the updated language inside of Clarify It is learning progression. So do you want to talk about, so you've put your learning intention in, you've narrowed it down, and then it generates this learning progression. So what does this 1 through 5 series of, it gives you a 1 and then a description. What does that look like and how does it help you in the classroom?
Well, I think that it will give you success criteria. Like it'll give you a list of, your 1 being most basic and 5 being most proficient, but it will also give examples of what that would look like as well, which is super helpful for students. And it connects right back to the learning intention.
Yeah, it gives you kind of like I can statements like in that success criteria, and it gives you the examples. And it's usually, it starts off with like lower language on blooms, like I can recall, I can do something. And as it moves up, it tries to get to that apply, that compare. So it really is just, it's a progression based off of Bloom's taxonomy is really what it is. And so it just kind of moves them up to that higher levels of thinking. And I think last year when I was using it, I was almost using it as a rubric, and that was
Right.
not the right way to use it. You have to use it as just a learning progression that
Mm.
we expect all of you can get here. You might not, but we expect that you all can get here somehow.
Yeah, and I use it predominantly math. And so a lot of the lower level would be like simple type answers where like equations and things like that. And your 4 and 5 would be more complex situations.
So it really takes that, because we're working together division wide to come up with outcome-based success criteria so that we have a consistency. So across the division, we've calibrated what we think proficiency is. But coming up with those learning intentions takes a lot of practice. Like you don't just sit down and write a fantastic learning intention the very first time. It's something, or at least for me, it's something that takes time to write. And so Clarify Ed speeds that process up. You can put that in, it generates that learning progression. It does use the number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've found in the past that some students were thinking they were equating it kind of to a rubric and they were like, oh, I'm just a 1 or I'm a 5. But those numbers really aren't about assigning a mark to that. It's just a quick way to communicate. Would that be an accurate description of that?
Yes. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
I think the one thing you need to do like with them is you really like, I've been printing off the success criteria and printing off like, I think Dallas, it was you pointing out the questions that can take you to different levels. And so that way now, even talking with kids, I'll be like, here's a group of questions. If you think you're a 4, then you probably can answer one of these questions in here, and that'll help prove that you're a 4. But just having it so it's not on a screen, it's in their book, and they can always, it's just always present that this is what we are learning.
Yeah, I like that idea. So I've been snipping the learning attention and success criteria and placing it in my EDSB planner. Just I've kind of moved to the content or the planner more as a Google Classroom. So I just snip it and I post it right in there so students can see and have access. And if I'm going to project my lesson, it's pretty easy to just throw it up there and review and have it up there throughout the lesson and that sort of thing. I do also like the feature of the simplified version to make it more like student friendly language. And that's the one that I'll typically snip and put in so that students can see it.
Yeah, they're always changing. Like that's the one thing I've noticed this year. You've really seen a development in the program and lots of
Mhm.
changes and lots of things that are, I think, working really well. Like I know when we first started learning about Hattie and some of the learning intentions, boy, it was tough to really like, I would sit there and debate, is this a unit learning intention? Is this a daily one? And this has just made my understanding of that so much simpler. Like this is a brief moment in time that's going to be part of the journey to help us get to this objective.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Like it is alleviated a lot of the workload of trying to figure out what your learning intention might be and then have to figure out your success criteria. One thing that I've found helpful is when you go to type in your learning intention, you may not really know what you really want. I like that it gives you the option of like several to choose from, and then you can decide what's the best fit for your lesson that day, week, or whatever.
Yeah, it makes me sound a lot more clear and intelligent than what I typed in the first place. So I'm always like, oh, that's good.
Yeah. And it does connect back to the curriculum I was going to add, right? Like there's
Yeah.
that tab where you can pick if it connects to that outcome and add it to your clarity pack.
Which
Yeah.
is really nice because we're all focused on the outcomes and we want to ensure that what we're doing aligns with the outcome overall. I think, Dallas, you said that it's the right fit. And I think that's a really important part. So you're looking for how can we organize the lessons on our journey towards that outcome? And the teacher is always still deciding what your day looks like and where it goes. What the Clarity Pack does is speeds up that where do we want to go today or today and tomorrow? And then it gives those 1 through 5, that learning progression really clear so that you can have conversations with students about where are we starting, where are we going. And so let's just talk about there's a few more features inside the Clarity Pack. So I printed one out just as a reference here. So you get the success criteria, there's key vocabulary, there's the simplified part, there is translation to a variety of different languages, there's the questions, and then there's a teacher pack, and then we'll get into the check-in tool. Before we get into some of those tools, you've mentioned that you put them in EDSB and you print them out and the students have them in there. Is that learning progression something that you just use at the start of class or at the end of class? Like how do you engage the students in that learning progression and talking about here's where we're going and here's how you'll know you've gotten there?
We take a few minutes at the beginning of a class to say, do you know where you are on this chart? Some of them will, some of them will be accurate. Some of them probably are higher on the chart, but then it's teaching them about what language Verso is looking for, because that's the other thing. I like printing off the key vocabulary sheets because I also go, this is the language Verso is looking somewhere in there. It's wanting you to say some of this because that helps it connect. There, the key vocabulary I find really nice.
And Dallas, sort of, you mentioned that you will project it up through, it's in EDSB, so the students can always reference it there. How do you engage students in talking about that learning progression?
I've done it, yeah, several different ways, but I like Geoff. I normally go through it or project it before the lesson, and then I'll refer back to it at the end and that sort of thing, or throughout the lesson. Last week, I printed off the success criteria for the students before they did a check-in, so I printed it off for them, and then I put a complex question on the board, which would be a level 4, and then I walked through how I would solve it, and I just spoke out loud of all the steps that I was taking. And then I had them at the end rank me where they thought that they think where I should be
Yeah.
in the success criteria or in the learning progression. And the conversation it was awesome. And it prepared them for their check-in, which I did the next day. We can chat about that later.
That's a pretty neat idea.
Yeah, I really like that idea because you're modeling, you're doing a think aloud, you're helping them to think about, and Dallas mentioned, we'll get to it later, the check-in piece. So what the check-in is looking for is for them to make a claim and then actually back it up with the evidence. And Geoff, you mentioned there's key vocabulary that we would be looking for. So that's provided in that clarity pack. But I really, really like that way to think about how do you get students to start thinking about it and be able to ask each other questions or ask you questions about how do we really know that you knew what you were doing in that step or where it's at. And it's shifting that perspective, which I think is interesting and sometimes easier for it to be about somebody else before it's about ourselves.
There's no one more critical than a teenager, and they
Yeah.
can pick you apart very
Oh
quickly.
yeah.
They might
There
have a hard
I got a
uh,
couple threes. So I
Yeah.
got a couple threes.
Good conversation, like, and that's what we
Yeah.
want them to do is actively reflect about where are you at and how do you know that's where I am. So both of you have mentioned that the key vocabulary is helpful and that just and am I stuck with those words or can I edit those types of things? And same for the learning progression. I'm not just stuck with what Clarify Ed comes up with. Do you go in and edit them very often?
I haven't edited them because sometimes when you do the check-in, then it doesn't play out nicely with the success criteria. What I will do sometimes if I put in my learning intention and they generate a bunch of them that I don't agree with, I will just use my original one and say, "No, that's what I want."
Yeah.
And then it works fine, but anytime I've edited them in the past, the success criteria has a hard time keeping up with that, so that's probably something it'll get better at, but right now, it's not as helpful.
Yeah, I don't really change it as well. I'll do the same thing that Jeff would do. If I don't love it, the learning intention, I'll just start a new clarity path and go back to what worked better before. I was gonna mention like there are some new features with the questions and the teacher pack as well,
So let's
which
talk about
I
those next.
okay.
Yeah. What are the questions? Like, what does that mean? And inside the Clarity Pack, I could click on the icon that says questions. What does that do for me?
It will just give you examples of different questions that, you could ask throughout your lesson. But now the questions they're at each level of the learning progression. So at level 1, there'll be different types of questions. And at level 5, there'll be different types of questions, which I really enjoy because it gives me ideas for questions to start my lesson, or if there's students maybe at a lower level, there's questions that I could be asking, or if you wanted to extend learning, questions there as well.
Yeah, I've actually when they do the check-in quite often now, I'll actually put those questions up on the screen because it does give a little bit of an advice to a kid to say, "Hey, if you wanna be a level 4, you should be able to answer this question using evidence." It's been neat using it in English because if you're doing a novel study, you can specifically put the novel in there, and so then it will ask questions based around, like, characters, etcetera, depending on what you're learning to do, but that has actually changed the way they do the check-ins, and we're having more success because it's just giving them, "Hey, pick one of these questions, can you answer it?" And if you can't, well, then let's try one of these ones on a lower level to see. And there is a bump it up feature then that you
Yeah.
could say, here's with this 1 or 2 students, I'm going to take you and we're going to see if we can bump up this learning by doing, say, this strategy.
Mhm. That's
So
cool, Jeff. I like that idea of projecting the questions up.
it really gives them a way to think about what does that look like, and then gives them a way, if I am able to answer it, maybe I'm a different level. And they've got the printout of the learning progression. So the more that we have that students are engaging and thinking about where they're at, the better feedback we get about where they're at and then what we can do from there. So you also mentioned, Dallas, the teacher pack. So inside the teacher pack, what does it do? What's the
Well,
advantage of using that?
it will give you a number of different teaching strategies that are high research based and high impact for each of the levels. So just like the questioning, the teacher pack now is generates different strategies at each of the levels, which last year I know in chatting with the group, they talked, there was a lot of the same strategies repetitive over and over and over. And I find that they've expanded it and there's a lot of good stuff in here and some great ideas for meeting kids at each of those levels.
Yeah, like it's I would agree last year, we would often I was in a sprint group with Porcupine and we would go through and we'd go, it's the same thing kind of over and over again." And so then I wasn't using it as much, but I've really liked it when I'm introducing a topic they have no background in. It's such a nice way to start to introduce something to get that prior knowledge that they might not have. And so that teacher pack can be really great. It can also be like a great thing for differentiating learning, saying, "Hey, you need to do an activity like this to help, but you need something more like this."
It's a great way to respond to diversity and classroom complexity in that it's giving you a wide variety of ideas. And I liked how you shared that it could be that we're all starting about the same place because it's a really new concept to us. And here's some good entry points to it. It is all broken up by level 1 in the learning progression. Here's strategies that might work all the way through. It can work for students who you're wondering, how do you help them move from a 4 to a 5? Or what does an EU or enriched learning and understanding look like? Both of you have been teaching for quite a while. So I'm assuming helpful to you as experienced teachers. So if you were a brand new teacher, do you feel that this would be helpful? Or have you had teachers that are newer using some of this Clarity Pack?
I think it'd be very helpful for a newer
Mhm.
teacher. I think I'm old enough now that I'm stuck in my ways, so I'll pick the ones that I am used to quite often. But it does give me a good reminder of, oh, this might be something I should try in my class. And I haven't tried this in a while. But for a young
Yeah.
teacher, this would be very helpful.
Yeah, especially for those collaborative type activities, or trying to get students to get to the next level or maybe reach higher, right? Some of the like peer tutoring strategies or things like that. I was going to mention, I just noticed this a couple days ago. So when I went through the peer observation and the action plan step, it gives me it within the teacher pack. It will highlight strategies that actually are from my action plan. So
Yes, it's
yeah,
designed to
it's
do
cool.
that. If you're a teacher and you're using the peer observation tool and you've identified areas that you want to work on, then as soon as you select that inside of Clarify Ed, anytime that you are planning or running a Clarity Pack, it will bump those up higher for you because it knows that's what you want to work on. And I think the other point that you mentioned, that the product is continuing to evolve, and they actively meet with all of the schools that they work with around the world to get feedback to improve the AI that they're using to support the behind the scenes pieces. The other really nice part about this tool is it's all education based and it's grounded in the work of John Hattie and visible learning. So whatever strategy you pick on this page, it is a high impact strategy. So you can't really go wrong with any of those. It's just giving you a lot of different ideas. And like you said, Geoff, it's when we've taught the same subject quite a bit, then we have things that we like to do and that we have a natural tendency towards. But this gives some different ideas, or like, oh, that would be something different to try, or would work really well for that student. Or I'm not quite sure what might be another way that could help this student at this level. And it can generate some of those ideas. So that's the teacher pack. Then there was the bump it up questions. And so with that, it gives, I think there's like, bump it up. It'll say, if you want to go from a 3 to a 4, here's some possible questions that you could use. And then it also gives you specific teaching strategies that you could use at that point as ideas to help move those students forward.
Thanks for joining us in part 1 of this conversation. Today, we unpacked what clarity looks like in classrooms and began to explore the impact of using a tool designed to enhance clarity, to develop focused learning intentions, learning progressions, and key vocabulary. Clarify Ed also offers strategic questions, which both Geoff and Dallas noted help students understand where they are in their learning and where they're headed. One of the big aha moments came when Geoff shared that Clarify Ed didn't really work for him last year because he was using it at the outcome level. But everything changed once he realized it was meant for those small, intentional pieces of learning, for those lessons. In the Northeast, we are focusing on outcome-based success criteria that helps teachers and students focus in on key aspects of learning inside the larger outcomes. These are a great starting point in Clarify Ed. In fact, narrowing down the learning intention unlocks smoother and more manageable check-ins, clearer success criteria, and deeper conversations with students about their progress and evidence of learning. Dallas also shared how he uses Think Alouds to support students in better understanding where they are and to help learners engage with the learning progression and reflect more deeply on their own understanding. A powerful reminder that clarity isn't just about planning, it's about creating visible learning moments in the classroom. In part 2, we'll continue to explore check-ins, evidence gathering, feedback loops, and how both teachers and students can use this real-time data to make responsive instructional and learning decisions. See you in part 2. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining our community of innovators and change makers. We hope the conversations and stories have ignited a spark within. We'd like to express our gratitude to our dedicated Northeast educators. Until next time, remember to subscribe to Any Voices and join us on the next episode as we share the stories of learning shaping our future. Thanks for listening.